demonstrate some of her, how she puts together some of her really great pieces, which I know are a multitude of ways she goes about them, between molds and hand building and throwing. So I'm excited to see all of that. And if you've seen her work, it's absolutely gorgeous. And if you haven't quite yet seen it, then go out at least at a minimum to her Instagram site and view it. So with that, let's turn it over to Danielle.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. And yes, so I was going to show today how I make the form Hyperreality. And it's kind of it's got a variety of different parts to it. So there's kind of a variety of different processes. I use a press mold. I'll be doing some throwing and then some hand building too. And a lot of times I kind of look at it almost like a collage, because there's a lot of little parts, and then it's adding pieces and kind of seeing how it works, you know, if it's symmetrical or if I want, you know, how to balance it. So, so I do have the piece with me actually right here. So I was just I can show it kind of up close, and I'll do my slides first. I've got a little PowerPoint, and then I'll do a little throwing. I actually might do a little hand building and then throwing, because it's all about timing with clay. So I'm just gonna let things firm up a little bit. So, and I do have 2 dogs, and my friend Rich is here too. So it should be pretty quiet in the background, but the dogs every once in a while will say hello. And Rich says hello too. So looking at this piece, this is Hyperreality. And it's got a lot of different forms. I use a lot of different types of glazes on it. So yeah, so that's my piece. And I made it in graduate school. So I created that piece in grad school. So, but I'm gonna share screen with you guys, and I'm gonna pull up a PowerPoint. So, but yeah, that piece was actually inspired. When I was in grad school, I was looking at, they were basically algae that could create their own energy. And I thought, you know, if we could have something like that where they can live weeks off of the energy they create and harvest from the sun, I just thought that's amazing. And it's just this tiny cell organism that it's able to be so efficient. And so that was, I'm interested in conservation, but I'm also looking at the ocean as a metaphor for the subconscious. And so I look at it as kind of this mysterious place that we're still, you know, getting to know and investigate. And so, you know, there's beauty, there's and there's that surface level, and then there's the deep depth of the ocean. So very interested in that. And then also the shapes in the ocean are so surreal, and there's so much texture and color that I kind of look at it, it's infinite for its inspiration. It's never like, oh, I've seen that, I'm done. So there's some really beautiful things. So I'm gonna bring up, I have a PowerPoint, and I'm teaching online this semester, so I'm getting very comfortable with Zoom, but I haven't done PowerPoint with it, so we're gonna test it out. So I might need, I'm gonna share screen. So I think it says that if I can, from the host, get enabled for the share screen. And I think it just takes a little bit. Okay, one more. Yay! Okay, awesome, you guys. Okay, this is so cool. Thank you. So yeah, so this is my PowerPoint right here. I'll bring this here. Make it a little wider. Okay, so yeah, so this is what I'm looking at. And I can go to, I guess we can just kind of scroll through. So images wise, you know, this is kind of starting a little bit. Can everybody's?
Yeah, you're not sharing. We're looking at you.
Oh, sorry, you guys. Okay, it is this one, I think. I mean,
you might have to restart your share screen.
Yeah, is it this? Are you guys able to see it now?
I can see your PowerPoint. It's not in present mode. Your PowerPoint's not in present mode, but but I can see it.
Oh,
I can see it.
Let's see. Yeah. Are you guys able to see it?
It's in a different window for me. Okay. All right. Yes, I can see it now.
Yay. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
How about, can everyone else see it?
And then I think I can do it this way. Okay.
Yeah,
There we
that
go.
looks great.
Okay. I know technology is like, so this is, so just kind of going through, so this is a work I did over at iLounge. So I'm really interested in installation. So these are thrown on the wheel, and I view them like little corals. Some of them have low fire glaze. They have some crawl. They're made, I do a variety of porcelain. So I use with frost, or I'll do Coleman porcelain. So I definitely love to kind of experiment. And this is an earlier piece. So when I was an undergrad, my first class was with June, it's been a while. It was, I'm trying to think of the name, but it's been a while, but it was quite a bit ago. And I really enjoyed doing ceramics. I was a painting major at the time. So I was just kind of looking at that decision between painting and ceramics. And looking at this, so this was another piece in my undergrad. And so I was very interested in floral and organic shapes. This one's called monodontine because a friend of mine said, they look like teeth. And so I made one little tooth right there. So it was kind of neat. So having fun with it. So my dad does dentistry. So I always grew up with tools and making little things. So then as, doing undergrad, getting ready, I really wanted to go to grad school. And so I did a post-bac at ASU with Susan Biner, and it could have been about 2 years, one with Susan Biner and one with Kurt Weiser. And I got this book, it's called Forms in Nature, and it's art by Ernst Haeckel, who's a scientist, but because scientists in that time period, kind of early Art Nouveau, they didn't have access to photography as much, they would draw what they see. And so these are some of the images or some pieces I was looking from a book and kind of recreating what I saw. And I just really got into detail. And that was coming from painting and drawing. I was interested in realism and trying to see something and recreate it, but also splice it and change it and do something new with it too. So, and that's the neat thing about ocean is that you can make it look like an ocean piece, but then you can abstract it too. And because there's such a wide variety of, living organisms, it can look really real, like it is an actual animal there. So, and then I'm also interested in flowers and, really organic forms. Hand building was really, really interests me. And so definitely interested in porcelain, very influenced by Kurt Weiser. And then I got to grad school and, started thinking about installations, and they had given us a building that we could take a room. Each of us could have a room and we could recreate or like do an installation or take it over. So I painted the room. I was looking at the BP oil spill happened at the same time I was in grad school. And so that idea of what was that like, the animals that were interacting in that space. And so there was light kind of coming down, like it was ocean-like. And, it was hard for me because there's nothing I could do about the BP spill, but it was something to kind of talk about it. So this is kind of the BP symbol. And then these were supposed to be little jellyfish, So yeah. And definitely it was intense painting. I did a lot of painting in that one. So, and then I started getting into throwing, and really what started this shape for me is I had drew it, and then I was like, man, what would be the easiest way to make that shape, or what would be the most straightforward, or how could I do this? And then I started throwing. I was like, oh, that'd be a fun shape to work with. So drawing is really great for doing artwork because sometimes it gets you to do something even tougher than what you would come up in your mind. When you sketch it out, it almost becomes, you know, you can really explore. So, and this is frost porcelain. And so it's really fun. So for me, this part feels like a collage. And then this is actually, that's Hyperreality. This is the pink piece, Hyperreality, before it's fired. So this is kind of greenware. And I have algae, but I also have these little nudibranchs. And so these are little sea slugs. And so it's kind of that creates its own little biology. And that's it with color. So it's just a process. And this piece, when it came out, I didn't like the pink. The pink was actually a different shade than this. And then what I did, I refired it about 5 times. And so all these little parts were different colors. And then these little plants, and then I, reglazed them so they were more a similar color, more unity. And then all these little pods were different colors, but a couple of them were this kind of plum color. And so I really liked it. So then I went back and glazed all of those that purple color, and then added the crawl, all that good stuff. So yeah, so it was definitely a little
Danielle?
Yes.
For your glaze, do you make your own glaze, or do you use commercial off-the-shelf glazes?
That's a good question. When I was at different times, I've made my own glazes, and especially like during grad school and at times when I was in residencies. But currently right now I don't, just because I don't have like a glazed kitchen right now. And time-wise, I love with commercial glazes because they're so, I can kind of control what color I'm going to get. And so it's a lot like painting for me. And so I like to layer other glazes on top of it to create more complexity. So currently I'm mainly doing commercial glazes, but I am looking to getting back into mixing. Because it is really fun. The mixing elements, you get something new and, But I also, for me, and I think that's a tough thing, is with art, you only have so much time. And so, and they're getting so good. They're getting so good at making commercial glazes now. Those Potter's Choice are really good. So I highly recommend. So yeah, so they're really fun. I also got into using crawl glazes. This, I think, was the first piece I did that. I overfire my black crawl. I do that with my white crawl. And so it says 0405, but this is the piece I kind of learned about. I just tested it. I take it to cone 5, it's glossy. And this one almost looks reptilian, because it's just that texture and it melts a little bit. It just gives, if it's at the low fire, it's dry and it's like platelets. So it's a really different, when it goes to 5, it's like a bead or a pearl. It's really fun. So this is actually when the crawl is low fire. And you can just see it's drier and it's a wider covering. So this was kind of the start of a new phase for me, and that I started thinking about metaphor with my work. So this is like the inner, the outer, that sort of thing. And definitely looking at abstraction. And this one is actually, it's a funny name, but it's called Hearing versus Listening. And so I was looking at, like, sometimes I'll be on the phone and then I'll keep talking and then the phone is clicked off. And I'm like, there's this, am I really listening or am I just hearing? And so these, I kind of look at them like ears or mouths, or, they have that anthropomorphic look. So it's really fun. So yeah, and this one almost, somebody says it's like it's going to walk off the table. So I love kind of interactive work. And then this was done it was a summer. This was a month, and it's Southern Ice, which is really the only piece I did this with, or I've used, that clay body. But I was wondering, should I glaze it or not? But I just, sometimes it's the clay body is just great on its own. I feel like with those really white clay bodies or even a dark brown clay body, it's just so nice just to let the clay show. And those are all, these little parts are all thrown on the wheel. And then I hand build the base and then I attach them and do kind of a collage. And all these are individually rolled. I just roll those little parts. So I love hand building. I love the tactile nature of it. So, this is, I was actually looking at a painting. This was, I think it's called The Lovers, and it's by, I'm trying to think who. It's probably it's a surrealist painter, but it's like these two people kissing under a cloak, and it's under a this cloth. And so it's this idea of like the above and the below, or kind of that concealed area. And I think, and of course I'm in grad school, so it's like all this must come together. But it's also, it's like, it was going with that metaphor of the way I see the ocean, or that kind of, that mystery. So, and this is a Stephen Hill glaze. And I don't know if anybody's used the strontium crystal magic. And a couple people, it's a really fun glaze to use, and you can put it under a glaze or over a glaze, and you get really nice crystals. So, it's hard to see, but in here, it really streams down and it kind of glitters. So I highly recommend Stephen Hill Cone 5. And then if you want, and it lets you know what you need to have for warm or cool colors. So I did undergrad or grad in New Mexico State University. So I lived in Las Cruces for 4 years, experimented with photographing my work at White Sands. So this is the piece right there. And just thinking of that kind of surreal space, because this space used to be an ocean. So it's like that, looking at history. And I love photography. So that's definitely another kind of creative pursuit. So, but yeah, this is in my studio at grad school. So just kind of looking at all the work and ready for my thesis show.
That's nice. It gives you kind of an idea of the size of your pieces too.
Yeah, so they're in that, seeing them all together. A lot of them, I have kind of a circular mold that I work from. So they have that kind of relationship to each other, but I like that kind of, it's that space where you kind of investigate something a little bit more and you can be above the piece. So yeah, it's nice to see them in relation. So, and then this one, so these are those throne pieces, and I did an installation for my thesis show, and so I threw 26 different forms. Well, I was looking at the alphabet and creating kind of my own hieroglyphs, and so creating 26 different forms on the wheel, and and basically doing 60 or 100 of each, so I could create kind of this large wall piece. They just said be ambitious, so I was like, all right, let's do this. And then I was going to create a message with it, and then I was like, what am I going to say? And then there's so much weight on like what you're going to say. So then they're like, this might be overwhelming for people to try to figure out what it says, like with a little map and a thing and a decoding. So, he was like, what if you make a painting with it? And so that's where I went. So I really am interested in fractals and kind of forms in nature. And so that's kind of went. And then there was another person, actually, this was in a warehouse, and it was a wonderful space to have a show. But yeah, they got me, I had a friend that was like, you should pixelate it more. So that's kind of this area, is getting looser with that. Then after grad school, I was still working with those pieces. So working with a gallery, and they said, what if you had it on canvas? Because putting the holes in the wall was like, ooh, so this was a way that it could go into someone's home and they wouldn't have to wouldn't be hammering all these little pieces. But I love that connection with installing. So this was another way I could do that. Then I did a residency at Anderson Ranch. And so I was there, it was in the winter time for 10 weeks. This was before I moved back to Phoenix because I knew I needed a bigger city. But I love New Mexico. It's like one of my favorite places. So, but I love these. They're really fun. They're like pillow-like. They're my little pillow pieces, and strontium crystal magic. And that one, I've mixed those glazes and they're just pooling, which is so much fun. So yeah. And then when I was there, I did this piece. I was basically at altitude, and they were like, I was hearing from different people, they're like, you can have really vivid dreams at altitude. And it was kind of true. It was very surreal. And so it's about that idea of suspended space or a liminal space. So, and this is nichrome wire, these little parts. So they were fired with the piece. They're just high temperature wire, the same in our elements. So they're really fun. And you can get them online. They're really thick. Another little piece, kind of trying that strontium. And then another piece from that time period. The residency was nice because they had a photo area, so I could photograph my work. These were wall pieces. And then they had wood fire there. They built all their kilns there. So we're loading, it's outside, it's snowy, it's like a campfire. But it was a lot of fun. So yeah. So some really neat colors. And with wood fire, you get this nice little feathering. So that's something totally different for me, just like all the different textures you could get. And a lot of the kilns there they made. So that was so neat to see that, to see what that looked like. Yeah, so I'm really having fun. I'm always interested in how can I bring sculpture and function together. So how can I make my functional work more sculptural? And then this one, I did have a firing that went a little long. I was doing a lot of loading, and I had a hold for like 5 hours, the top temperature. But all this stuff runs. So the biggest thing is you just have to prepare. And so everything was stilted, so it was fine. But I got these really fun drips, that were just, that's the best part about a kiln, is you don't always expect what'll happen. So there's a little bit of surprise. And then this is moving back to Arizona, and I did an installation at Made, putting all my work up. So that was my first installation on Roosevelt. So making that transition. And then Artel, I did Artel, which was this wonderful installation where all the artists had a room in a hotel, and then there was like 600 people a night, and they all walked through. It was like trick-or-treating for art, and so there were installations, dance performances. It was a lot of fun. So I did black lights, and I was just trying to create that kind of surreal space. And then there was porcelain that you walked into. They gave me 2 rooms. So you kind of walk into this space and so I was like, I'm going to use this, it's like dreamlike. And then this is installation board on the wall. And then I had industrial Velcro that held it up. And then I was able to install because I couldn't hammer into their walls. They would be sad. They would be upset. So nothing could be changed. So I had 2 panels on either side. And so this is the second room. And you can kind of see the porcelain going right here. But yeah, it was 3 days of this installation. So by the end, I was like, I'm tired. But it was a lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a neat one. And so many people there was just really great shows. This was 2015. So it's a lot of fun. And hopefully we can do something. I think it's such a great idea because it's like little rooms, and you really get to transform the space. And the person that was running the hotel was an artist, Tara Sharp. So she was the organizer, and then she was working with the hotel. So she got the rooms for us. There's about 15 to 20 rooms. So I'm going to say, yeah, at least 15, but it was a good amount. So this is actually in those shipping containers in Roosevelt. So I started getting into what was a different way to use these pieces. And so I was using rare earth magnets that I could have them on the ceiling. So I'd put a screw in the ceiling and then it would stick to the screw. So it was really fun. And this one's called, it was like Baroque. I forget what my sensibilities. So I was looking at Baroque and how curvilinear those things are. And sometimes I feel like decorative as a craft artist, decorative as a craft and an art artist, let's say, like all of us, you know, we're all artists and we're all craftspeople too. I feel like the decorative gets this bad name, and I feel like it's like reclaiming that and saying decorative is actually really hard to do. And it's amazing all the work we've seen in history. So I love the decorative. So this one's called Microcosm. So getting into, this was at I Lounge, an installation there. This was part of that installation, kind of a wall piece above. Then a little up close. So looking at, I love porcelain, I love the translucency, and it just has that otherness where it doesn't always, it can be so many different things. It just becomes part of the environment. And then, yeah, so I was looking at lace. I like, because clay is an object, we can really make it be so many, it can be a stand-in for other things, which is really kind of cool. And then coral, this is that black crawl. And this one, experimenting, you can really paint with it. So painting where it's thin, it gets really like the brush strokes. And then the thicker you apply it, the bigger the pearls will be. And that's taken to cone 5. Spraying, I got into spraying, which was fun. So I would take a, you know, color, spray one side, then spray the other. And then this one is one of my favorite pieces. There's always that point where you're like, oh, like I don't want to sell this piece because I love it so much, you know, or I don't want to let it go because it really worked for me. But it has, this piece has a back, it has a little kind of an opening in the back where I could put an LED light. And so it's got a little LED light. And then these are little crawl glazes on it. And this is frost porcelain. So it's a real white porcelain. And I just love the blue light with it because it feels very oceany. So it's a triptych. And so with this piece, I created a triptych, and I Lounge was working with writers, and they were writing a poem, or they were getting to know us and our work. And then they wrote a short kind of written work, and then in response to our work, and then we created artwork in response to their written work. So it was called Siren, because it was an artist, it was a writer that did a poem about this ocean kind of sea nymph, or, you know, kind of siren. So it's really neat. So loving the, you know, and I love photography too, so photographing it. And then I also, this was over at, this was Scottsdale Public Art. This is Influx. And they do this every year, and basically businesses and spaces that are open or aren't actively being used, they'll actually have artists come in and create artworks to fill that space to kind of engage the community. So this is right over in Marshall Way. The only thing I would say for everyone here is that ceramic work is very delicate. So putting it outside in the public without, you know, kind of security is tricky. It actually did really well. And what was neat is all the gallery owners in this space would watch it during the day. So they were really good. It was just the only thing at nighttime, Scottsdale at night gets a little intense. So there's a little mishap with a couple of these, and I think one of them might have been borrowed permanently. But I did another installation with them, and it was in a more public place, and it did really well. And to do public installation, I had to get art insurance. So there was this whole thing, you know, there's definitely a process of doing that, but really fun. So they had kind of a light element. So this is sprayed, little piece kind of sprayed with 2 different colors, different directions. This was from a pillow piece. So I created kind of an upright pillow that's hollow on the inside and kind of paddled it so it looked like a gumdrop. And then basically started at the top making the cone shapes and went in a spiral. And I had it on the banding wheel so I could just turn it as I added those pieces. So if you look, real close, you can kind of see the layers that I started from the top and then went down. But really fun to spray because painting is sometimes you just got to spray. But the spraying is really nice with this when I was experimenting because you get different tones and textures, and it can create a lot of movement.
I think my question on this is, how do you get something like that into the kiln without breaking the tips off of all of the pieces?
That's a really good question. That's a very good question. I actually, so it's like the Chinese torture finger feely things. You kind of have to put your hands through it to find, the sturdy part and then lift it up like a cake. So I kind of lift it from the bottom, but I'll put my fingers kind of in between the little deals, the tentacles. But yes, there have been some tentacles that have had a little bit of issue. So little underglaze on them is perfect. But yes, shipping something like this would be very tricky. So I'm definitely, the more I do art, the more I'm like, okay, how can I ship this too? But I really love this piece. It's a really, really fun one. I may have to make more of these. So I like them. So this guy's around the same time, and it's nichrome wire, and this one's called Pins and Needles. And they're just little nichrome wire with a little clay on the end of it. And if you have small little spheres, it doesn't crack, no problem, because it's such a small amount of clay. Even though the wire isn't shrinking, it's so tiny, it's not an issue, but really fun one. This is over at Mesa Art Center. This is kind of a little installation I did with Spark, the Festival of Creativity. And then these are metal, these little poles. And so it was great because I could use those rare earth magnets and put them on the side. So it was a fun way to kind of include the space. It was really neat. And that was a 3-day event. But and then they gave me a good amount of room. So that's a great opportunity. There's a lot of public art opportunities. And this is part of it. And it was so funny because there were little kids, they were running down here, and they told me they're like, oh, I didn't know it was art. And because I just had like my little shards, I didn't put the corals yet. And so I was like, that was good feedback. So then I put the corals because I was like, I need to kind of lift this up a little bit so they know like this isn't a run space, but it is a great place to play, and it's just a wonderful art center. So very fun and very interactive. And then this is over at Roosevelt. This is a permanent installation. It's my and a basic installation. It was part of a purchaser award. And so this illuminate this hotel or this apartment complex, and I forget what the other, Linear, I think was the other one. They had artists come in to do permanent installations to kind of involve, and interact the arts and the new kind of building that was happening in that space. So it was really cool. I didn't realize they were going to put me in that spot. I was like, oh, this is a great spot. Like, so it was fun to see all the, the designers and the, because they're just getting ready to open up the apartment complex. So, but it worked really well with the rug, because it had that movement. So it's a little up close. So you got the ocean and the porcelain. I also got into photography, doing the artwork in kind of talking a lot about the kind of a lot of the building that was happening in the Roosevelt Art District and gentrification. So thinking about art and putting my piece kind of as the human element of this space, the artist that is in this space. And then this was at Eye Lounge, and I like to draw and paint with the crawl, so you can really paint with it. That's actually, you know, it's the same glaze, but the thin area is going to be really small amounts of the black crawl, and then where it's thicker would be bigger. And then this is the white crawl. And you can actually take underglaze and mix it in with the white to change the color. So you could get, yeah, so this little installation at Eye Lounge. And we had 3 solo shows a year, so it's a great space to show. And then last little, I think I'm almost done. So this one's called Particulate. I was looking at building architecture because of all the building downtown. Really like that piece. And this is the crawl at low fire, so you can see how different that kind of surface is. It's cobblestone crawl. And then this, looking at architecture again, I had a good friend that was an architect. So it's interesting how art and architecture are very similar, just beautifying a space or making it kind of thinking of the space in an artistic way. Also thinking that piece also like stained glass, like a stained glass window. And this one, so whenever I do installations, I always have to do a sketch. So I always say it's good to draw. So if you know, I always like, I mean, that's an aspect that's come in my work is drawing when I propose something. And then this is actually, so this is the installation, one of the last ones I did, this towards the end of my slideshow, but this one is by Local Light. So this is Scottsdale Public Art again. And this is the one, it was in conjunction with Canal Converges. So it's kind of like bringing people into that Canal Converges area. And so each one was carved. They're coil pots tall. They were too tall for the kiln. So they're actually cut, you know, so they're actually 2 parts kind of put together. And then I had kind of carved it and had a great time. So, but a good amount of space. So, and this one did really well. There was no interaction. So, so yeah, and that is my end of my slide. So I'll get started, and I was gonna first maybe do a real quick making my mold. So let me see, I'm gonna stop share. But are there any questions on that, or are we gonna do questions at the end, or any time is good?
Yeah. Yeah, does anybody have any questions? I haven't seen any pop up on the chat, but it's a great time as we transition. And Danielle, we hope you will share the PowerPoint with us so we can put it on the website with the recording. That'd be great. So. Yes,
yeah, I can definitely share it with you guys.
Danielle?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know, let me open the chat.
Is the crawl a cone 5?
That's a good question. So the crawl is actually, and I've got a piece here with it. The crawl is actually, it's an 04. It's traditionally like an 05 glaze, 04. So it's low fire. But for my work, most of the time I take it to cone 5. If I want it to be flatter, I'll have it 04. And so this is kind of what it looks like if it's flatter, where it has that kind of platelet look to it. But yeah, traditionally it is a low fire glaze, like it's 04 or 05, but it can go to 5. If it goes hotter than 5, it gets smaller and smaller because it shrinks. So yeah.
Danielle, is that a commercial or is that something you made?
It is a commercial one. And there are a lot of people, you can make it. There's one ingredient that you use the most in a crawl glaze, but it basically, because it shrinks so much, it shrinks more than the clay body. So you can see the clay below it. It's, I think, magnesium carbonate. That's is like one of the big.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. But it's really nice. And I love it because it gives another layer to my my glazes. And on this, actually, you can see, if you look on this one, like it melts into the purple glaze. So if there's a glossy glaze, it'll actually melt down. So it kind of becomes becomes part of it. So, well, yeah, so I'm gonna move this little guy and then I'll start kind of getting this little slab going.
Perfect, perfect.
That's good. Okay. Yeah, so I picked up some, I like to use the B-Mix Cone 5. That's one of my favorite ones, but I also like Nara porcelain's really good, so. And when I work, I like using, I have the wiggle wires, so those are really good. So, yeah. So I'm actually gonna be using my large, I've got a large bouncy ball kind of mold that I use. And that's kind of how I started the Hyperreality piece. Let me see. This little bit. Okay. So yeah. And the mold, the only thing, because it is a deep mold, this is kind of what it looks like. So it's pretty round. It's a big guy. I always say I have to be kind of careful with it because it's like you can throw your, it is sturdy. So I'm just gonna roll this guy out. And I use a good amount of clay for this because I want it to be kind of thick. There you go. Yeah. Just kind of throw this one out.
Does the, you've got the two pieces together there, as you roll them, and does that compress it enough that it takes the air out of between the two pieces?
Yeah, it does. I mean, because I'm doing that just because I want it to be like a thicker amount of clay. Mm-hmm. But yeah, with all of that kind of rolling, basically that kind of compresses the clay. So yeah, and I also, once I get this into the mold, I'm gonna put a little more compression on it because I thicken up the clay a little bit. So, and there's so much with, when I roll out a slab, I like to kind of do the turning over. Like some people use the slab roller, but I'm not as into it because I feel like the particles are a little bit, I don't know, they're a little bit stronger when they're overlapped and stuff with getting kind of rolled out. So, but I do like the slab roller if I'm doing something with a lot of, I did a lot of multiples, that kind of thing. So, but yeah. Well, like if I would use the slab roller if I had to make a lot of things with slab. If I was a large slab project. But this is really good just for like a one time. And I'm gonna really quick. So I got this. Yay. So now I'm just gonna take this slab. It's like that. Well, let me think what I'm gonna do on this one. Actually, I'm gonna keep it like this. So I'm so what I'm gonna do is, so the next thing I'm gonna do, you guys, is I'm gonna take a little bit of clay. Sometimes people, when they're pushing the clay into a mold, is they'll trying to think. They'll use like a sock with sand to kind of press it in. What I like to use is actually, I'll use a little bit of the extra clay to press it in. And so that I find, because sometimes if you have a sock with sand, the sand starts coming out the sock. And so that'll get in your clay. So with this kind of, I'm just taking a little extra clay like this. Got my piece and it's pretty thick. And I'm just gonna slowly feed it into my piece. So I'm just kind of, and I always think this almost feels like, it's almost like a printer, you know, where you're feeding the paper into it. So I'm just slowly taking the clay and it's kind of going like that. And sometimes I'll put this on a banding wheel too. Okay. And the last thing I do is I'll press down the inside of the piece, because I'm kind of avoiding that because I don't want to tear the clay that's in the middle, basically. So I'm kind of putting more pressure on the side area versus going straight for the bottom because I don't want to tear the clay. Yeah. And then I'll just kind of cut off this stuff. So just like that. Okay. Got a little bit of that, which is good. Okay. And then basically now I've got, you know, I've got all that extra clay over here. And so I'm going to just take little bits of clay like this. And I'm just going to press it into the, and I'm going to show you this part once it more full. I kind of laid my slab on the floor and I'm like, ooh, there's a little bit of sand down there. A little bit of outside. So yeah, I'm basically just taking, and I'll show you 1 second. You can see a little bit. I'm just kind of taking the clay and just putting little pieces in. And that, I feel like that kind of makes it stronger. So, because it's like plywood, you know, where you got different grains happening, or you're, you know, kind of all that clay is kind of intermixing. I think it was pretty fast. Yeah.
And since your clay is that even and dampness and stuff, there's no need to score it, and you're pressing it in enough and it'll all stay together.
Yeah, so yeah, because it's pretty even wetness, because I was thinking about rolling out my slab earlier, and then I thought, you know, that could be kind of problematic because it would be a little bit firm to get it to slide this way. But yeah, all of this is equal wetness, so I don't have to score yet.
Perfect.
So yeah, but definitely a process.
And then I know we're kind of like our accelerated pace because we have like that 2-hour window, but how long do you normally like what's your preferred time to leave something in a mold to let it set up a little bit? What have you found successful?
I would say that's a good question. I would do to set up, well, so yeah, and it is a lot faster than I normally would, but these firm up pretty fast. So I would, you know, even like 30, well, not even that much actually, because this firms up pretty fast. And what I do is I'll let it be here for like a smidge, and then I'm able to kind of slide it off, and I'll let it firm, just flip the other way on the table. So now I've got this. So I would say I give it about maybe like 10-15 minutes. So it goes pretty fast, but then I'll let it firm up, just sitting on the table for a while after that. So yeah, I would say like maybe 10-15 minutes just to firm up because the plaster will take a lot of moisture out of that clay. But I think also part of it is like, I don't want it to get too dry because I'm going to be adding a lot of pieces on top of it. So I want it to stay pretty moist as much as, you know.
Right.
So and a lot of it is just kind of evolved over time. So it is good to do this because it's like, then it gets me to think about like, why do I do it that way? But it's definitely, I work pretty wet, I would say, or pretty moist with my work, just because I even have damp boxes that I use. I use quite a bit of damp boxes just because everything takes so much time, you know, that it's gives me more time to work, especially in Arizona, because in other places, you know, you can leave your artwork out on the table and it keeps the same moisture. But with a drier area, you know, you can get to leather hard pretty fast, you know, with like even within the same day. So yeah, so those damp,
especially with summers like this. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, so this is the B mix without sand, and I really like it because it behaves a lot like porcelain. So I'm just kind of getting this, all of that. And I love the flipping, just kind of helps it kind of be more elastic and kind of spread. But kind of be more plastic, yeah. So I'm just kind of, this is the other side.
On some of your earlier pieces, the clustered tubes and cones, did you paint did you brush or spray?
Those I actually, that's a good, some of them are sprayed and some of them are brushed. So if it was underglaze, I did more of brushing and painting, that type of thing. So yeah, so some of them are more kind of brushed. The ones that I sprayed were just ones that, like that spike, the tentacle one, just because painting it'd be really tricky to kind of get in between all those little parts. So that was one that I sprayed where I wanted that kind of transition. So what I might do, because I know time-wise, I don't want to run out of time, is I've got this one which is good, and you can kind of see the half of it. I might be able to do the other half, but I was going to do a little throwing. Or, yeah, I'm trying to think, I'm like, which is the best? I might be able to make one more really, really fast. All right, I'm going to try it, you guys. All right.
Yeah, well, we have an hour. We're at our hour mark. So it's still a good amount of time.
We got time. All right.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna make this one more, and then I'll go on the wheel. We'll do a little throwing. That firms up, and then we can put the spear together and do a little adornment. So
nice.
The process. But I know this is kind of this is like building a mold. You know, it's like the just getting this little part. Then after that, all the decisions come, where it's like, getting to adorn and detail. So
I like to see even some of the simple, the starting techniques that folks have, because it's so different. And just even your comment about your preference to hand rolling versus using a slab roller, I think it's interesting to hear why people, choose the differences. So.
Yeah, because it's like, there's something I like that's very tactile about it too. And I feel like I can have more input on how thick it is. And I feel like the clay kind of stays more open. And the other part is that some of the particles they go more in one direction. It feels like when it's slab rolled, because it's like they're just getting pressed that way, but you could flip it and go the other way. But I like that sort of, it's great for sculpture, especially weight bearing sculpture. So So I have the other one over here, so I'm gonna pop that out and I'll show that process on this one, but I'm gonna put it on a little bat really quick. So I'm gonna be right back. Let you, so you can kind of see this. Okay. Wanna get this guy. Okay, guys. So I'm over here with this guy, and so I'm just here, and I'm just gonna lift this up a little bit. And you can see, even just in that amount of time, it's pretty, you know, it's thick, and I think the thickness helps, you know, that helps a lot for just kind of getting it to hold the shape. So I'm gonna set this over here. It's gonna sit right next to me. Okay, and then I've got this guy. Okay, so I got this one. I'm gonna bring my mold over. Okay. So how's everybody doing?
No, you're doing great. I think it's great. I was just thinking it's nice to see that, you know, the struggle is real for everyone of having enough surface space in your studio to put all of your stuff, you know, arrange all of your pieces, because I constantly struggle with that.
Yes, it's like, yeah, it definitely is. I mean, well, and I think that's kind of the cool part of art, is that it's like, you know, I think as artists, we get really creative, where it's like, I have a chair. This is a good place to hold it, you know, like, yeah, it's definitely, the struggle is real.
Yeah.
But I really love this space. But yeah, I remember I heard an artist that was like, they had a studio in a bathroom, and I was like, how do they do this? Like in their restroom, or, you know, like, but it's the neat thing is that, you know, it's so nice to have an at-home studio, just because it's like being able to stop by for like 10 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, you know, and just that it's so close, but it's also feels separate too, enough that it's not. I did kind of have kind of a loft space once, and that can be kind of tricky if it's like where you know, like, if, you know, it's good to have a separation of space.
For sure. How much does your mold weigh, do you think about?
That's a really good question.
It looks beefy.
Yeah, this is definitely a beefy mold. I always say, like, this is like the mold that could give you a back adjustment, you know? I have to be really careful with how I lift this one. But it had to kind of be this thick because, you know, it's got a good amount of depth. And so, yeah, so, and then and I think I might have put a little extra plaster in there, but they always say it's good to have like an inch around. So, or like an inch and a half, that type of thing. So and this might have maybe 2 inches on the side. So this looks good. Okay. So I'm gonna trim.
How deep is it? How deep is the opening in there?
Yeah, I would say maybe 3 or 4 inches. Well, about 4 or 5 in the very smallest, or depth, the deepest part. So about 4 to 5 inches in. And it was a bouncy ball that I got just at the store, and I was like, ooh, this would be a great form to use as a base. So yeah. Okay. So last little part, I'm just gonna throw these little guys in there. So just getting this in there. And when I do this, it almost kind of feels like, kind of feels almost like paint. Yeah, have my friend kind of up and take a few. Yay. That's so cool. So you can kind of see it. But yeah, I just kind of, and it just feels a little bit, you know, just kind of smearing all that good stuff. All right. So this just gives it more support. And then when I put the two pieces together, you know, this is almost kind of, it's almost like the Romans when they say, you know, arches are one of the strongest, you know, forms, because it kind of gives that like infrastructure. I guess it's like an armature, but this is the inside that it's in most of my pieces that are circular. Yay. And it's so fun how clay porcelain smears. It's just like, oh. So yeah, next I'm gonna get on the wheel and I'll show you some of my throne pieces. So yeah, I'm gonna let this kind of firm up. This will stay there. The other one will just kind of firm on its own. And yeah, we'll kind of go from there. All right. So yeah, so I'm gonna go, that looks good. Yay.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
It's great to see that.
Kind of the downward, yeah, it's seeing the vertical. Like, thank you.
Thanks, cameraman.
All right, so the next one, we're gonna sneak over here. All right, so this is it's the Arizona room. It's super duper cool. But we're gonna go down to, so this is my wheel. I'm gonna set this over here. Okay. So good. Okay. So I got this. And I'll keep it on the wheel. Just go really quick. And I'm gonna sneak you around really quick one last time. So I'm gonna wedge really fast. And the thing is with when I'm throwing is it doesn't always have to be centered for these because they're a little bit more, it's kind of nice when they're a little off center or they're a little bit more organic. And I just do the ram's head. So I kind of, so I'll probably do about this. Okay. This one's a good size one. And some people do, there's like the spiral way of wedging. I just kind of like the ram's head just because it works really well. And it kind of, you get the, you know, the nose and the two horns. It's so good. And then I roll it like this. I always think it looks like a croissant. So bringing this guy around, here's my wheel. And I may have, everyone, but that's so cool. Like cameraman thought Rich is amazing. Here we go. Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of run the wheel. Yeah, that looks great. Hey everybody. All right, so I'm just gonna turn this guy. And it does love to make some sound. This is a great wheel. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of get this going and I'll get a little, I'm gonna get one little thing. I'm gonna get a little board. Yeah, so on these, so the porcelain is really plastic. I just kind of press it down. And these kind of, when they get off center, they almost look like they're dancing, you know, or they have that kind of movement. So I'll make a couple of these, and these will be the adornments for this piece. And I use actually, a lot of times I'll use, let's see if I'll see over here. I'll use like a paintbrush to open them. So, you know, I'll throw kind of a narrow spot like this. And then I'll just use so they're almost like a bowl shape. And then go a little. I kind of, if the water stays in, it can get a little crack. And so and I'll set it right here. So I'll do a couple of those. It's hard because I'm like, hey, everybody.
Yeah, it's great.
There we go. Hey, everybody. I'm here. Yeah, this is, you know, I've got some artwork in the side area. So, yeah, and then some of my sculptures from Local Light, that last installation, are behind me. So I've got a couple, but I like them there just because it's just kind of, you know, it's like a little environment. So here's a second. But there's a lot of ways I can kind of abstract these sculptures. So, so, yeah, so I'm just kind of throwing these guys. But if it gets a little thin on a piece, there's a lot of, you know, kind of fun ways to change the form. So yeah, with this, like, I'm gonna bring it up a little bit. Hey, everybody. So I made a little thin, and then I can just, you know, some like that, and then you get like a totally different shape. And I can bring it up to the screen, but it's fun to collapse them so they become a little bit more floral. They're really fun.
I think it's great to see like the idea of the organic work, because I'm still fairly new to the clay community. So when I learned to throw, I learned in a class, and it's very set rules in learning in the class, and it has to be centered, and it has to be this, and it has to be that, and don't touch the sides so they collapse. And so it's neat then as you get more into it to see works like yours where you throw it and then you turn, you know, it purposely into art, the organic piece of it not being centered. And it's great to just see that it's okay to embrace that and how beautiful it turns out.
Yeah, and I think that's why that kind of form is one of my favorite ones, because it's like the beauty and the imperfections, you know, or the beauty in that, like that moment of like, oh no, it's collapsing. And I think it even goes back to undergrad, because I actually liked those forms when my bowls would collapse. I'd be like, this is kind of neat to, you know, it actually was kind of organic and interesting. So I think my teachers would be like, do you want to keep that? But you know how it is when you're learning, you know, it's like there's such a struggle, you know, in the beginning of especially throwing. So
yeah.
Yay. This is so cool. This is so neat. All right, so I'm gonna do 2 more little guys. But yeah, the organic really opens itself to some fun things.
So you're throwing off the hump, right?
Yes. Yeah, so this is throwing off the hump, which is really fun. So I'm just kind of, you know, I've got the clay, you know, I don't have to keep putting new clay down. I can just throw off of this, which is really nice. So I just wedge once, and then another shape that's, so it's nice not have to wedge more than once, or to, you know, have to keep getting more clay. So the fun thing is you can really create, you know, sculptures on the wheel, and you can get a lot of different forms. So it's really limitless. So there's this guy. I love a banding wheel. This is actually, it sounds funny, but IKEA has wonderful banding wheels, and their banding wheels can be pricey, but the IKEA is really good. Their banding wheels they've got are really great.
There was a question when you get done throwing that last piece, if we could have a close-up of the tool you're using to open it. I think you mentioned it was paintbrush, but.
Yes, it is. Yeah, so it's just kind of like a little paintbrush, like a thin one. I do that just because it's so much smaller than my hand that it's easier, and it's soft. I also felt like if I, you know, and this is what it kind of looks like. If I use my finger every time, it could also like ergonomically not be as good. And so, yeah, so I use the paintbrush, but also because it helps me do like smaller forms, you know, so it's.
Yeah, you know, that's great.
So
I think that's another thing you learn when you take a class, you know, it's always your fingers and being so precise on the pressure and all of that. So then as you get into it more and start to see that other artists are using tools like paintbrushes or sticks or rulers, you know, that help open just to meet whatever the size of the object is they're throwing. So.
Yeah. And that's the fun thing too, is a lot of artists now are really making their own tools. And then the other element is there's artists that, you know, like mud tools, you know, where they've made their own tools, but it becomes its own business too, which is kind of neat. So
yeah,
I think artists are one of the best tool makers, because it's like, we're always like, I need this, you know, if I had something like this. So, but it really makes your work unique, you know. So, and then this is my last little one. I'm just doing a regular little tube one. And then I'll start putting the other ones together. So yeah, just like that. And the porcelain is just so porous. If I use stoneware with this, I'm gonna get a lot of grog. So I'm gonna see a lot of that texture, which can sometimes be an issue. So yeah. And I can always put plastic on that clay and come back to it later. I might do one little small one too. I'm gonna actually do one more. So I'll make it tiny. Sometimes I throw these where it just, you know, it keeps going and they're like teeny tiny. But that's a little guy. I have small hands, so that helps a lot. But yes, it can be really detailed. That's a little one, littler one. Okay, yeah. I usually will kind of wet my hands a little bit. Yay. All right, you guys. So I'm gonna just get all set here. And then I brought a towel. Okay. Yeah, so it's nice to have everything right here. Okay. I'll probably put this over here. Okay. I'm gonna set, actually I'm gonna keep that there. Yay. All right, you guys. So this looks good. Oop. Okay. So yeah, and I'll take this. Yay. All right, this is awesome. Thanks. This is so cool. All right, you guys, we're back. This is so cool. All right, so Nick's last little thing is, so yeah, finishing up putting those two parts together. So this is great. I'm gonna get, so we've got this one. Got that guy. And I have a bat. I'm gonna be right back. So I just kind of take the foam batting and okay. So yeah, so I've got, this is that porcelain piece right here, or that's the last one. So this is the other half. I'm just gonna flip this. I have it, this the inside. And the thicker one I put on bottom because that'll be more weight bearing. And then I've got it here, and then I'll just take a little, yeah. That's so cool. I will get a little needle tool. All right. And some people use slip. I don't use the slip as much. Just because, like, I don't know, sometimes if it gets real thick, it's like you have to hide the slip a little bit more if it's really noticeable. So I tend to use just water and really score it up. I got this guy. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I'll be just gonna score the other one really quick, and I'll put that on top of it. Yeah. But the batting really helps this, just because then that'll be, just keeps it more round. This is the time that it actually does, sometimes I'll let this firm up more. But I'm gonna see, let's see, 1 second. Well, what I might actually, before I do all of this part, now that, like, because we are talking about timing on the clay, is I'm gonna take this guy. So, okay, I have this one. This is the 1/2. So I've got another mold. I was just gonna kind of, I'll show a little bit of these. So I've got like different things that I do, like in that piece. A lot of times I have, hey everybody. So I've got in the piece that we saw, like there's plants. I also have kind of the, I have the corals that are in it. And the plant shape, I basically kind of roll in the hand. I'm just gonna let those circles kind of firm up a little bit. So, how's everybody? And I just kind of round this. So the plants are kind of just, they're kind of rounded shapes like this sort of, like they're little ones. And I'll do a variety of different sizes. And that's the big thing, is having those details. Yeah. So just kind of a little hand-built element like this. I'm gonna do one more of this, and then the other part I was gonna show is the nudibranchs. So the little sea slugs. Oh, I was like, they're really cool and they're fun. So nudibranchs can be, they're just like, their colors can be amazing. They just have really interesting textures. So I could have, you know, a plant grouping something like this, like a little guy.
Oh, cool.
So a little one. And then I have kind of this, it's like a damp box that I'll put, you know, a lot of my pieces in as I work. It's okay right now because it's firming, but this is one of my smaller damp boxes. It's like a tabletop one. And then for the nudibranch, I do kind of, you know, it'll be kind of slug shape, and this is a bigger one, so I'm gonna make it a little smaller. Yeah, and this is, I would say after this, everybody should check out nudibranchs.
I just made a note to look them up because I had.
Yeah, they're really cool. They're actually, this is so lovely. Rich front, so they're like this.
Oh wow.
So, and it basically means nudibranch is exposed. Their lungs are on the outside, and so the air, the water travels through them, and that's how they breathe. And so their antennae, this is the front, and then the back, I think all the little parts, the spikes are part of their like breathing respiratory. So it's really cool.
That is cool.
They're really neat, and they come in like red and purple, and there's cookie dough one, you know, there's just so many different like color schemes. So
see, and this is how
They're really beautiful.
Yeah, and this is how educational Arizona clay is for people, is science lessons, you know, all sorts of things as part of the clay making world.
This is very true. We get a lot of different things. Well, and that's the neat thing about clay, is that you learn so much. So, you know, there's always something new to kind of try out, or, you know.
Yeah.
But one thing I would say, so when I make these, they have a lot of texture to them. And so, I mean, this is just kind of the start of it, but like I could, a lot of times I'll add things, like I might, you know, like if I do multiples, I'll get a plastic bag and I'll make like 20 of these little dots, you know, and then I put them on all at once. So a big tip for me is that and then I just take a fingerprint of water, you know, and I'll add something, you know, maybe actually I'll do, this will be the base. I'll do the little fantails at the end. But yeah, when I make a multiple, I usually do it, I do a couple of them. And then, because I'm afraid my piece is going to dry, you know, so I don't want the base to dry out. So I'll kind of keep the main, you know, base kind of moist, and then I'll add all the parts at once. So like that tentacle piece, you know, I would make like 20 or 15 of those little tentacles, and then I put them on all at once, so that
Wow.
yeah, so that it just, you know, so I could get all those parts. Trying to figure out.
And we did have a question about the spelling. I looked it up and put it on the chat. So if you were curious about how to spell the slug's name, then it's there. So we can all look it up later. There'll be a quiz on the 14th. No.
That is so cool. Yeah, they're really fun. I love them, and they're just the tiny kind of little creatures, but they have so much personality, you know. Yeah. So I think they're pretty neat. And I made like 5 of those, and I'll just kind of cut them. You know, I'm cutting them so that they have a flat little part to them, so then I can just kind of attach.
Yeah, I didn't have a full appreciation for the 3D effect that was on your slugs until you started to demo this piece of it. It was harder to see in the PowerPoint. So this is nice.
Yeah, so I've actually never demoed this part, and it's because each of these is kind of individually made. And the biggest thing, I used to not slip and score, but now I do, because I had a piece, like, you know, like one time pop off, and Kurt Weiser was helping me unload a kiln, and he looked at the piece and he was like, huh, no slip and score. And I was like, like from that point on, I was like, I really, you know, I should really slip and score those things. But yeah, there's a lot, like each of these little pieces is like its own little sculpture because there's just so many little parts to it. So I think that's a fun thing to do in in sculpture is like the detail is, it's like creating little microcosms. So you could have, kind of like a little nudibranch like this.
Oh, that's neat.
So a little guy like that. And then I'll do the antennae are, I just kind of roll them out. But basically these, like as I complete them, I'll put them in my damp box over here. And then, I might make 6 to 8 of them and then put them on. So the plants go on first, like these would go first on that kind of piece. And then the nudibranchs, and then the corals. So this piece was definitely kind of a layering. It's like making a cake. And I've actually recreated this piece. See, I've done it twice, 3 times. And so I'm gonna keep bringing it back because I really enjoyed it. Sometimes one of your earlier pieces is one that it's like, it's really fun. It has
for a piece like Hyperreality, just the clay building piece of it, about how long would you say that process is? How many days, hours does it take you to put something like that together?
That's a really good question. I've never actually kept track of the hours, but a lot of times it's like definitely 2 weeks to a month of just every day kind of getting in.
Right.
It is a good amount of time, and I'd like maybe 4 to 6 hours a day,
Okay.
just kind of, working on it. So this is what I've got, it's got the little nudibranch, all that good stuff. And something I use a lot too, because there's a lot of small little parts, is, then for some of the detail on cleanup is I just I'll go in and smooth it with a paintbrush. The other tool I really like, it's a good one, is this one, and it's a color stylus or color shaper. And Lorraine knows this one because we use it in class, but it's like got a really soft, and it's just great for details and kind of adhering. So yeah, so this is another one of my parts that I'm going to set over here. It'll go over there. And so, yeah, and I've got this guy. So all this would pretty much be in the damp box as I'm working. And then, yeah, so let's see. So we're doing good on time. It goes fast. Let's see.
Yeah.
What we could do. Yeah. Let's see if this is gonna. So what I would do with this is I just kind of go around and kind of trim it. So I'm just kind of trimming off the extra. And usually I do this with it sitting this way because it's lovely. And the fiddling knife is great because it's like not too sharp that the clay sticks to it, but it like really works. And then this one too. So I'm going to do the same thing, just because it'll be easier to put them together. And you had a good question on the time. Like, we'll see how they do, because they do like to firm up, like I give them actually a pretty good amount of time, like maybe, now that I think about it, before I actually put them together, like maybe 40 minutes. But I 30 to 40, depending. So let's see. And also the clay body, because the wetter the clay body, like Nara or something, would be real moist. This doesn't have grog in it, so it is a little more moist. I'm going to sneak this guy. I'm gonna put this one back to like here. And I'll flip this. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, and it's pretty fun. I'm gonna set this here for a second. Yeah, it's always kind of seeing which one is happier being the base. Yeah, I think this is gonna be okay. So yeah, these two, then I basically just kind of, I would go around and kind of smooth all this. Let's see. And I will put clay over this so that connection part isn't as noticeable. And the other thing too is I always think this is going to be covered. So that's the other part. Now what I might do on this actually, let me see. I'm gonna get a little bit of my metal rib here. So I'm gonna trim a little bit. Oop. Okay. Sometimes one is happier being the base than the other. I think the other one stayed in the mold longer, so it's like I'm better okay with, or I'm more okay with the the weight of the other piece. Usually the top piece I make a little lighter. I make one a little thicker because that'll be the top. And this is going to be covered with the others, so that's kind of part of it too. So then I'll go back in. For the most part, I like to I'll use my hands to kind of get the pieces together. And then I'll take the rib. But just with time a little bit. And I'll fill in kind of if there's little divots. I always say this is like a clay Band-Aid, but just filling in the spots a little bit. And then a lot of times I'll do kind of a clay slab that goes across. And this I just kind of, the biggest thing is to cover the seam because I don't want to open it up later. And I can paddle this too to get the shape. And a lot faster than I usually would go. So that is the key to keep in mind is this usually takes me a little bit longer. So, but I can come back and shape this, all that good stuff. But yeah, so what I would do, one of the forms that I use quite a bit with this, I'm going to set this right here. So I've got kind of that sphere that I've put together, and I'll keep working on this and rounding, and I can keep kind of rounding. But this is like my base, and then I would just kind of roll this guy. So a lot of, like with that Hyperreality, that one has a lot of, this is the other mold I do, it's a little guy. And so I just gonna set that guy in there. Okay, so just kind of getting this. And then I'll do the hand building part, kind of the detail part. This is just kind of the structure, which, you know, is part of the, it's part of the process, but get this look. And then I just kind of take a little, let's trim this out. Okay. How's everybody doing?
It looks great, Danielle.
Thank you. All right. I'm just gonna trim around this. Okay. So just kind of trimming. Okay. So I've got kind of this, which is a shape I'll put on top. And I didn't do what I usually do. I'll put a little extra clay in it. Just so the clay kind of holds the structure. Okay. So this is one I can add and then I can build off of. Okay. And then I'll just score this guy. And when I score, I really rough up the, I want to really bring up the surface so it attaches. This guy. And then I can do this where I can leave like a little, I'll leave a little smush and then I know where to score later. So I can just kind of, just because I added a little water to that piece before I set it there. So I can just go like this. And then just use my needle tool to kind of take off all the extra. I just use the side of the needle tool. And this is definitely, it goes faster than the usual process. So there's more kind of prep. What is that? Just kind of cleaning that. Then we'll do a little kind of handle part. Okay. So yeah, I can just kind of smooth that. So, get this little guy. Okay. So options, you know, for adornment, you know, when I have it like this, if this was built up, usually I'll have the circles all the way around it. And so I may have, you know, if this is like my little microcosm space, like I could have, like I would add nudibranch, all that good stuff. Like I could score this guy. You know, I might have him right here. So he's coming back in. I have something like that. So this becomes kind of like a little space. And then, you know, I have these guys. I can also do, and I have this up a little bit. And then something I like to do too is the tentacles are really fun. So let me see if this is, just to get a little closer where it is. So yeah, so you can kind of see that. And then, yeah, and then the other part is, I'm trying to think, I can do these little tentacle shapes. So they're like, and at the end, maybe we could do an aerial, you know, just above. So sometimes the tentacle part gets dry at the end. I usually roll this on a regular table. I won't do the canvas because the canvas gives me that canvas texture. All right. But I could have a couple of these together. And I just, when I'm rolling my hand at an angle like this and just light at the end, and then that makes that conical shape. But they're really fun because you can, these are smooth, so you can kind of curve them like this, so they become kind of this wavy, and that's something totally is different, it's fun. So like, so I can set this over here, but then I could do a third. Let's see. Roll.
Danielle, we had a question about the domes for drying. Do you ever make a small pinhole in them for drying? And I actually was going to ask a similar question related to a pinhole in general in that enclosed circle to let air.
Oh yes,
move.
yeah, that is
Do
a
you do
really
that?
good. Mm-hmm. So yeah, with these, I think, yeah. So with the other piece, so I did do a hole punch. I do a hole punch in the end, and I do it on different spots here. And then there's a hole on the very bottom of this too at the end that I'll cut. When I cut the hole for this, I'll scoot it to the edge of a table, and then I'll just cut it with my fettling knife when the piece is still moist. It'll be at the bottom of this circle, yeah. But these guys, very good question. Yeah, so I really love these. They're Comfort tools, and they're just like for circles, different shapes, all that good stuff. So I'll do kind of, and I'll even, if I punch the hole all the way through, that helps it dry more. So then so it has that kind of cool look.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I have these little guys. And so I'll just cut these. So this is just I can score them. So it's kind of like creating little environments. Something like that. So there's a lot of different things we can do. The other thing is, I love tools. So there's so many different kind of shapes, like for adornment, even on this, I can do kind of dots kind of going across him. So like that, a little. Yeah. So it's like an environment. I'll do a kind of a closer look at this guy. Yeah, lots of different things. So yeah, and then even one of my favorite new tools that I got, these are really great. I've had students that have these, they're really fun. But you can, you can kind of create different shapes or surfaces. So I'm going to get a little bit closer because I know, so you can kind of see so yeah. So then the last little part, so we've got the corals. So with these guys, I got a couple different forms.
Thanks, Danielle.
There's many parts in this party. or like there's just, it's layers. So I always look at, you know, sculptures are kind of like a painting where you're adding layer, layer, layer. So, you know, and basically imagine this, then basically the next stage for me is all of these circles are on it. A lot of times what I do is I'll do all of this with circles, and then I turn that over, and the last part is the top so that the circles aren't smushed. So I basically do the bottom first, and then I flip it over and finish up the top. And the top is more, the circles won't be, because of the weight of this, it is kind of pressing down on these. So yeah, so I just kind of switch it up. So this is basically,
So
yeah.
speaking of the weight of that you just mentioned, can you talk a little bit about warping and slumping, and is that a problem? Do you deal with that a lot, or how did it take you, or how long did it take you to figure out how to overcome that issue with the weight of a lot of this?
That's a good question. You know, I think the timing is a big thing. Like this clay, I usually hand build with, if I'm doing demos, I usually hand build with B-Mix with the grog, because it has more body to it. So this doesn't have grog, so it's a little softer, but it acts more, it acts more like a porcelain. Slumping and stuff like that, I sometimes kind of like it because it makes it a little more surreal. But in this, like I can see, I would want these two parts to wait longer. Like honestly, I would probably make both of them, and I may wait till the next day to use them so that they're a little bit firmer. But I don't want them too, and I would put them in a damp box. And I don't want them too firm, or else they wouldn't be easy to put together. The smearing the sides would be harder. Yeah, there isn't too much slumping. The biggest issue I have is actually cracking, you know, because porcelain is one of those issues that porcelain loves to have little cracks if water stays in it. So like when I'm throwing things, I'll, you know, let the water come out from the inside, or else I'll get a little S-crack on the inside of my corals. And then, you know, seams like this, the biggest thing on the seam is to push the clay across, and then use the metal rib to go over it, you know, and maybe this way. Because clay has a memory, so I don't want to always go in this direction. I usually will go up over it so that it doesn't come back in that area, because I don't want it to remember the seam. So it's kind of like forget about it. So yeah, so those are my biggest things. I don't get too much slumping and things, but I will in this, it is, I would give this actually until tomorrow to start putting together, just because, yeah, because there can be some slump, you know, I can see, yeah, I definitely like it when it's over, it'll stay overnight and kind of firm up. So, but yeah, so
overall, how long does it take for a piece like this size when it's finished? How long does it take to dry? And well, before you would start to be ready to put it into a kiln even?
That's a really good question. I actually have a piece, before we go, I have one more piece I could show really fast, that is actually in the damp box, and it's been there since this summer. Like I'm going to dry it, but it's like when I dry it, I want to like focus on it. And so usually drying, you know, what I do is I'll make it, and then I'll let it stay in the damp box until the damp box kind of dries out. Like I'll just stop adding water to it. And I'll have the bag on it at first, and then eventually I'll take a plastic bag off and just let it kind of adjust, because in the damp box, it's absorbed all that water. So if I take it out right away, it can get some cracking. It's too fast. So it could be a 2 to 3 week process of drying, you know, just to avoid getting cracks. Because it, you know, in maybe 2 weeks, if I can kind of push it. Yeah, it's the tough thing. Yeah.
Another question we had was, when building as it's bigger, do you build on drywall and fire with it?
That's a good
question. Or after it's dry?
You know, I don't. I usually I haven't done that yet. But I do use a lot of, trying to think, I use a lot of these banding wheels, like the big banding wheels, kind of wide ones, especially those tall sculptures I had. I haven't had to do kiln shelves yet, just because if it's long and flat, then I'll build it on a kiln shelf, because then I don't have to move it or shift it. But for the most part, like most of my pieces are like a cake, you know, where it's, you know, just kind of lifting. So the biggest thing is just building it on batting like this. And you can get this at Michael's. And then that way this stays round, and I won't set it on the table because this will flatten. So I still have the round, you know. But yeah, basically I wouldn't adorn all of this yet. I'd be working on these little circles, kind of filling it up. And then I would flip it over, finish the top, and then start kind of putting on all these little processes. So,
Okay, great.
can I show you guys one more piece really fast? The summer piece?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please do show us. We have 5 minutes, so yeah, please definitely show us. I think we'd love to see it. The other question we had was just, what's the brand of crawl that you use?
That's a good question. Give me 1 second. So it's Mako, and it's by Mako, and it's cobblestone crawl. Or actually it'll just say white cobblestone, or it'll say black cobblestone. And it's by Mako. And Marjan's carries it. It's in a small container, and then they also have it in a larger one too. I actually might have, let me see 1 second.
Okay.
I actually might have some of that. This is kind of what it looks like. It's Mako, and this one's the black cobblestone, and then they also have the white. And the white you can actually tint with your underglazes, so it's really fun. But I've made like a pink crawl, you know, you can make it purple or teal, just mixing in the underglaze. So really, really fun to explore and kind of experiment with. The other thing too is a lot of people, students, artists that I'm working with, BizFix is this new wonderful tool. It's a little bit pricey. It's $22, and if any of it is left on the top, it'll actually glue the lid shut, because it has silica in it. So you can sand this, you can patch all your cracks with it, you know, if you know, on your pieces, you got porcelain, but you just want to sand where it dust mask, do it outside. But this is really good. It's white, and it's for bis pieces, so you can glue parts, all that good stuff. So last little thing I was just going to show. So this is like my summer piece. Ooh. I can kind of show this. You can see. So these are actually my damp boxes that are here. So I keep them under the table. But let me see. It's been a while since I've looked at this piece. So. But it's one I'm really excited. So this is the same process that my, and I can lift it out too. But yeah. So this, I'll lift it. Yeah, so that's the finish for me, is like all those little is going, and then I can burn it. So this one is in the process of drying, and then I'll glaze it, and you can see all the little nudie breaks. Yeah. So that's one of those that it's like I'm not ready to dry yet, just because I want to be able to dry it very slow.
That's really nice, Danielle.
Thank you. Thank you. It was, and it basically was in the same style as Hyperreality. So, yeah. Where's the other little guy? So yeah, definitely.
Is that piece for a specific installation, or do you have in mind what you're doing with that piece already, or are you just creating because it's gorgeous?
Thank you. It's actually, so it actually was for a show in Virginia, and I was going to ship it there, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't want to rush it, and it was still moist. I had other pieces that I sent over. I made some smaller pieces, but I thought, well, I'll try to get this one in too, like this little extra piece. And then it just got a little more elaborate. And it's just everything takes time. So yeah, this piece is it was for that show, but it's going to be a piece kind of open for other shows that come up. So yeah, that's kind of my
And then
piece.
one last question back to, you know, problem or issues in the studio, or things when you deal with a studio, especially a home studio. How do you manage the water from throwing? Do you have, you know, how do you filter out your clay? What do you do with the water? I know that's always a question. And then do you have a water source in the studio, or that was another question that came in?
That's a really good question. We're just getting a sink in the Arizona room, which is awesome. So we'll have a utility sink. I use a lot of times I'll have just like one of my, like a bucket or a small like throwing bucket that I'll keep and wash my hands. And then outside, a lot of times I'll just use like outside, there's kind of some containers that I'll use for water, or I'll have kind of something like, you know, something like this, or, but yeah, with water, I don't really, the biggest thing, if I'm using my computer while I'm working, I have to make sure my hands are clean. So, so that becomes like having definitely water and having kind of a cloth nearby is a big thing. But I will throw my slip water outside just because not, you know, just so it's not in the sink, and I clean, I just, you know, when I'm throwing, I'll throw it, put it outside. I have like a pile that I cover up. So yeah. So very
good.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. And do we have any last questions for Danielle before we go?
Thank you.
This was so fun, you guys. It was great to meet everybody and good to see familiar faces. Very cool.
Thank you. And and as we would expect, we're getting lots of kudos to you for just a great demo. Thank you so much for putting it together and taking the time to show us all three techniques. So it's, well, I mean, I suppose more techniques than that, but you're throwing, you're molding, you're hand building. It's so neat to see it all come together, and yeah, very inspirational. Even myself, I'm like, oh, now I have all these great ideas, and my day job is in the way of this creative thing.
Well, I'll tell you that is definitely, you have to kind of, it's hard, but you have to create, it's like a schedule type of, for me, and sometimes I'm kind of a late night person. So for me, it's like I get all my things done during the day, and then I have my like getting my Starbucks, and then it's like, and then I'm starting to work. So, but you know how your schedule changes, you know, a little bit. So it's just like that adjustment of, you know, just creating that separation of space.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. And thank you so much, Danielle, for making time for us on a Saturday. And we really, really appreciate it. Thank you to your background production help too. So.